It's me, Sant Cervantes, again. Tonight we've got Tom Thompson and Jono Bradford are going to be talking about how they're working their way to becoming commercial pilots. Jono's been around for a few years now, and flies his LaBelle not only at the club but also in the juniors. And this year he won the St Surf's Trophy at the club, which is the highest scoring pure glider on the open ladder. I think his best flight was over 400 kilometers, where he was trying to get his diamond distance. So, quite a proficient glider pilot. He's been doing his commercial now for about 1.5 years and just about finishing. And we've got, he's joined by Tom Thompson. He's been with us for a couple of years now and advanced very quickly, got his silver last year, won 2 trophies, the Andy Penswick trophy for the best club solo flight. And that was, if I remember correctly, 139 kilometers in the junior, where he went out to jump shade and back. And as a result of that, he also won the Jedi Trophy. So, gliding's advancing their careers and has been put to good use, in assisting them to get their CPL. So anyway, I'm going to pass you across to them and they're going to tell you how they're finding their path towards becoming pilots and how it relates to gliding.
Well, our journeys and some of the lessons we've learned, as we've kind of said previously, about opportunities, failures, and how to gain some more confidence throughout your career and gliding as well, and how that's helped in the cockpit and lots of throughout my CPL training and Tom's PPL training as well. So yeah, I'll pass you back over to Tom again.
Yeah, I'll just tell you a bit about where I've been, what I've done. What?
Your scholarships.
Yeah, so I'll just go back to the start. So yeah, I was at uni for 3 years, and then I wanted to change my basically my career path. I was studying for interior design, but then I just decided I wanted to be a pilot. So I was left uni and then started looking for scholarships, and I came across one for gliding. So and I started looking at SGC, and I phoned up one day and came down, and I've been here since then. So it's definitely a good choice. Definitely a good choice.
So so then I started, obviously I've been here for a number of years now, but I started becoming interested in becoming a commercial pilot back when I was about 14. Thankfully, Dad back in the day had done a bit of gliding when he was my age, and kind of knew where to drop me off at the weekends. Well, and obviously ended up bringing me up quite a lot, but started off doing a bit of flying here, and then developed into kind of I'd like to do a commercial career, and started looking at opportunities to get scholarships for that, and ended up in 2017 getting a PPL scholarship through the Honourable Company of Air Pilots, which a number of other junior pilots from the club have also got. Pays for your full PPL exams and all, licensing fees, etc., which was a massive kind of boost towards thinking about doing a commercial career. And same year I ended up doing BGA 2-seat training alongside Fred and Lachlan down at Nimsfield. So that was kind of an introduction that we'll get on to later. But then in 2018 I started training up at Dundee, where I'd done my PPL, and then completed my night rating in the same kind of year at the end of 2018, which Tom's also just done his night rating with the help of an Air League scholarship. And then thanks to the help of Brian and Colin and Jamie for eventually sending me off on my own, I started flying the Tug in 2017. summer of 2018. And I've been flying the tug kind of since then, learning lots of things along the way, and using that as a way to build commercial hours. And, you know, a couple other people are starting to kind of go along that route as well, that have kind of done their licenses in the last couple years. And it's probably one of the best things I could have ever done in terms of both saving some money and, you know, kind of broadening my flying experience to help kind of during the ATPLs, like some of the flying that I've done, you know, it was helping answering questions in your mind, and all that sort of experience comes into help when I didn't really expect it would, which was something I never really thought would happen, but there we are, it did. So then I, you know, been flying the tug for a while, and then I eventually started the ATPLs I started them in 2018 as well, and kind of slowly but surely got my way through the first series of them. So ATPLs, for those that don't know, are the Airline Transport Pilot's License, which, you know, you've got is one of the kind of big theory licenses you've got to fly airliners. You know, Jamie, Matty, and every other airline pilots at the club will have them. And it counts. So when I did them, it was 14 exams, you know, including things like meteorology, aircraft general knowledge, general navigation, which was a big one. But now it's down to 13 exams, and lots of lessons were learned during ATPLs towards preparation for exams. Really does kind of set you in good stead, which maybe wasn't what I had a couple first times around, but you know, we learn. So unfortunately, I eventually I'd got to my last sitting of those and had to kind of go around them again, which was a bit of a knock, a rather large step back, but you know, kind of pick yourself back up, dust yourself down, and kind of keep going. And so I started that in January of last year, and then got them finished by June. So much quicker the second time round, but you know, it's the way it goes. And then after finishing those, as Sam said previously, I've kind of started doing my commercial pilot's license, which that's kind of where I'm at, and just coming to the closing stages of that, mainly due to weather and plane maintenance. Yeah, that's kind of been where I've got to so far, and I'll talk about in a bit about how you know, experiences over the years have really helped in kind of my training of the CPL, because I'm doing the extended 25-hour CPL, which is a bit longer than some other people have done. And yeah, so I'll hand you back over to Tom, and he'll kind of talk you through the stage that he's got to with his, you know, future career goals, etc.
So yeah, where I am just now, so I'm at the PPL stage, so I've got my night rating. Now I'm focusing on hour building towards like his commercial pilot's license, but I first would need to do the ATPLs, which I'm doing next year. So yeah, there's 100, yeah. So do you want to
turn to me to take over there?
Yeah,
so to start your CPL, like Tom will need to build up to about 150 hours before starting the commercial course to kind of start there. And that, you know, that's where flying the tug, and I think he's kind of getting in towards that sort of stage. And yeah, and that obviously flying the tug reduces the cost a little bit. But when we talk about you know, you've got your future ratings that we're going to be ending up doing. So what the route we've got here described is kind of one of the many routes you can take. You know, people that have been airline pilots at the club will know they've probably done it a different way. Many of you know Fred, obviously. He kind of did the multi-engine IR, which is the multi-engine instrument rating, which is flying a dual engine aircraft under instruments and doing ILSs and approach procedures into Perth, Dundee, Edinburgh, and many other places as well sometimes. So that he did that first, but this is just the order we've got. It's kind of, as I said, one of the many and different varied ways that you can do it. And so I'm doing my training up at ACS, and so is Tom. So then after you've done your MEP, which multi-engine piston rating, you go on to do your multi-crew cooperation course, which is all about learning to fly as a crew. Sam alluded to it earlier as well. So you learn to fly as a crew and cooperate with one another, which I think when we go on to talk about some of the coaching stuff that we've done throughout gliding, that I think has helped in both, you know, kind of the training environment, but will also help rather a lot when it comes to working with people maybe you've just met on the job or just at doing these courses. And then you've got the jet orientation course, which is for flying jet airliners, so that's 737s, A320s and such like.
Is that like 10 hours, 10-hour course?
It's a 10-hour course roughly. Yeah. And then the upset recovery training course, that's kind of getting to do some fun aerobatics and spin recoveries and all that. And then type rating, you know, that's whatever aircraft you're going to end up flying on the job, and then off you go. And then, yeah, to talk about the airline job, that's something that we're going to talk about with, change over. Come on, slide. There we go. So our future aims for careers and how gliding's helped us along the way. So pass you to Tom.
Well,
so yes, what are you wanting to do then in the future then?
So yeah, I'm really quite open to any job. I wouldn't really, you know, I don't have a set. I used to be quite set on being an airline pilot, but I really wanted to, you know, I really want to keep my options open and yeah, see what there is to come. You're the same as well.
Yeah, I think over the years I was very much set on, oh, I want to go fly for, I don't know, British Airways. I was like, I want to fly for an airline. But I think as having spoken to, you know, kind of lots of people and kind of been starting to surrounded by different attitudes and viewpoints on what people think aviation should be or what they view it to be, I think I've kind of opened my mind up, as Tom said, like to different opportunities. And, you know, you've got things like 2XL aviation, which is kind of surveying and Coast Guard. And then there's like Drake in Europe, which used to be known as Cobham, which they operate out of airfields down south, flying Dassault Falcons as kind of aggressors to the military, which I think would be pretty cool to do as a job. But yeah, that's just kind of one of a multitude of routes that you could end up going down throughout, you know, your careers. And, you know, Sam's been off to British Antarctic Survey for quite a few times and seemingly enjoyed that very much. But yeah, to then kind of link what we've done, I've started doing a lot of competition flying and cross country, but obviously don't really want to go on a ramble about that. But like I've kind of noticed a lot of things throughout being coached and doing competition flying have helped massively in cockpit environment. So obviously, you know, the juniors last year was held at Aston Down, and I've done previous coaching at being coached, I mean, at, you know, previous juniors back in 2017. So Tom's going to talk to you about the BGA 2-seat coaching and the kind of one of the experiences he had in a flight last year, etc.
Yeah. So it was like 3 flights out the week I think I had. So I had one in a DG 1000 turbo, Ash 25, and the Duodiscus that landed on the ridge in Denbigh, Horse Bravo 1, which was a really good flight. It was Rory Ellis that I was flying with, great pilot, really, yeah, very knowledgeable pilot. So yeah, that was a great opportunity to, you know, learn from him and, you know, aspire to be someone who, you know, flies for a living and also flies, you know, competitions. So yeah, it was really.
So when flying with Rory, what did you feel like you got out of flying with him? Like, kind of, what did he talk you through and take?
Yeah, well, it was, yeah. I think it's a lot to take away from it, like the professionalism of all the planning. The throughout the days, there was a lot of planning that went into all these fights, and it was long briefings throughout the night, and yeah, it was really good. The atmosphere was, yeah, it was really good. But yeah, I'd say taken a lot away from these coaching sessions, especially put them into my, taking them into the powered or my powered flying. Anyway, they're definitely transferable skills.
So I think with the coaching side of things, I've been lucky enough over the years to have a lot of flights and two-seaters, both from the club and with people that have come to the club, and experienced, different styles of coaching kind of over the years. And last summer I was, lucky enough to end up going down to Husbos for 2 weeks, and thanks obviously to Brian and Adrian, I ended up getting thrown in the back of their gliders for a couple of flights throughout the week. And obviously it's going a bit more down the competition route, but it promise it all does link back to helping in the commercial world. So I ended up obviously flying and experienced kind of different styles of coaching. With Adrian, I ended up having quite, hands-on, did a bit more of the flying, whereas with Brian, I was kind of sat and kind of watching what was going on and observing what was going on around me. And obviously in a lot of the other flights I've done, it's kind of coaching and kind of sitting in the back as a P2 is always incredibly, obviously sometimes you might not always think it's the most beneficial thing, but when you kind of sit there and observe what the pilot in front of you is doing, I found during my CPL, like when I'm sat with my instructor, it's quite a how to put it it's a good learning environment in terms of being able to watch what another pilot's doing and kind of gauge what's going on in their head and work out and observe the situation and have more situational awareness. That's what I was looking for there. And have a more observant kind of view, because competition flying is fast. There's lots going on around you. You're in gaggles and start sectors, and when you take that into the commercial world, you're not always, in that sort of busyness, tight knit airspace, but there's a lot to think about and a lot of planning involved. And that's where Tom was alluding to, the planning, etc., involved with, even just competition flying. I found throughout my CPL training over the last couple of months it's a case of the old adage of, prepare, fail to prepare to fail. I've experienced that one a little too many times over the years. And so it's planning each step out and always kind of having redundant steps that, fallback plans. And if that's allowed me throughout my CPL to have a nice and relaxed training environment, which then helps you to, progress at a sense, or a good rate is probably the better way to put that. So yeah. And then we'll go on to a bit more of the competition flying side of things. So Tom, you were introduced to competitions in August. What did you kind of your main takeaways from?
So yeah, it's just busy, very busy. But again, it was a really good environment to be in. I really got to understand the airspace down there as well. Like, this is, it's always going back to, it's always going to help me in the powered world. The airspace down there is very complex and very interesting. So it's a lot, up here is a lot easier to navigate than down there. So yeah, it's definitely something.
Yeah, well, I think one thing I've certainly found, like in my commercial training, is gliding's then kind of not channeled, that's the wrong word, but like it's the use of flying cross country and kind of having the opportunity to sit in the air, in and around the airspace and get comfortable with it, allows for a sense of comfort when you're flying commercial and you're under a high stress environment of your instructor saying, okay, you need to do this, fly, you know, go into a VOR, do procedure turns, and then kind of come down on kind of stepped in approaches under an instrument hood. And, you know, I'm coming around down the approach and the instructor, you know, tells you to take off the hood and you're landing. And I think that sort of comfort with knowing what airspace is around you certainly creates a more calm and relaxed environment in training when, you know, you if you didn't have that kind of base knowledge. Obviously you've done ETPLs, you've done those exams, but then there's that real world experience that I found massively helpful in terms of just being able to do rather than have to think. So that's where, you know, I think when I say controlling the environment around you and whilst you're flying, I think that's one of the main takeaways. So obviously, I think a lot of you probably are aware of my incident that I had down at juniors last year. Ended up landing gear up in rather nice glider, one shown. But I think the main takeaway, you know, I'd quite like to be quite open about the experience that I had of I messed up, but there's many reasons to why I messed up. It's not one single fail point of why it happened. You know, we'd been flying in the morning, kind of launched into a rather dead sky. I was right at the front of the grid. Off I went, scraped around for half an hour, 45 minutes, nothing. Everyone came back, relighted, and then ended up going out the start gate, messing around, well, not messing around, kind of scraping around in the weeds for a while, trying to climb up, getting really frustrated with myself, and then pushing off, doing the task. But, you know, up until that point, I'd only really been flying my Lebel cross country. So having been given, for lack of a better term, a hot shit for the 2 weeks, I completely, you know, overcooked a final glide in a glider that when you put it into forward flap, it just goes. Really goes. And you know, I think the whole experience of it was the perfect example of a Swiss cheese model of all these small things of, you know, relighting under pressure, kind of feeling pressure to go fly again in a competition environment, and then, you know, lots of little like kind of not mistakes throughout the flight, but kind of things to add pressure. And you know, I had a good discussion with Phil a wee while back about, you know, racing for that line when it's not necessary. And I think that's maybe a good takeaway for a lot of people, not forcing yourself into a situation of needing to do something when you don't really need to do it. And I've done that a few times in my training over the years as well, just kind of overcomplicating something when you don't need to. And I think so obviously came in overcooked it a little bit, and then just complicated everything up when I was trying to land. And I think, yeah, I've and tried to put this 20 into landing flaps, and that puts you in a bit more of management system, or kind of a management style of the aircraft when you're kind of, there's a bit more to do. And yeah, that ended up with me landing gear up on the runway at Aston Down, and yeah, not the best of experiences, shall we say. But then to link that back to, you know, commercial training, that was probably one of the only times I think I've not been able to take myself out of the cockpit and slow myself up, whereas I found that experience, as much as it wasn't a pleasant one, was incredibly valuable going ahead into doing my commercial pilot's license. And the training involved with that was because I you know, was able to say, okay, look, things are starting to get a couple steps ahead of where I'm at, you know, let's pull it back a bit and be able to be in line with where the aircraft is, if not a couple steps ahead. Because that's kind of one thing you've got when you're in those sorts of high stress environments. You've got to be able to manage not letting the aircraft get ahead, and I certainly did in the case of being at juniors. And yeah, that's kind of one of the main takeaways from that, was just always stay on top of what you're doing and how to manage the situation. Yeah. So I think so Tom,
No, I think that's it.
I think not too much more to speak about. I think we'd quite like to open it up to questions, because hopefully that can maybe lead on to a bit more
Discussion.
more of a discussion from it, just because there's not masses that we can go through. But I think if people have got questions, I'm more than happy to answer loads of them if you've got them, about inspirations, etc. So yeah.
Right, anybody got any questions? And one of the sort of things that strikes me, Jono, from what you say is, you know, the whole business of flying, whether it be gliding or commercial flying, is about managing yourself, and you know, and getting in, and as you say, you know, being, you know, ahead of the aircraft. And I mean, one of the sort of things that strikes me, you know, when people are doing their commercial pilot's licenses and all the rest of it, right? It's actually quite a stressful experience, and really, you really have to manage yourself, and confidence comes into it. And if you know, if you have a situation where you've done something wrong, then you really have to put it behind you, which, you know, to be quite honest, you know, from what you've been saying, you know, you've got up and recovered and got on with it, which I think is admirable. You know, I mean, is there any comments you'd like to make about that? Because I mean,
yeah, actually, I think like one thing I certainly was when I was starting my CPL, you know, I obviously flying the tug was absolutely fantastic for our building for me, but from that point of view, I never did much, you know, navigation and kind of going out flying through airspace since basically my PPL skills test, which was a good kind of 2.5 year time gap of not doing that style of procedural flying, that when it came to my CPL, that's what you're doing in your commercial pilot's license. And I was incredibly nervous. And I could have said this to my instructor. I was like, I'm going to be incredibly rusty / please watch what I'm doing, sort of thing. You know, like, and when I was doing that, I had to be quite open about the mistakes that I kind of knew I was going to be making. And that's one thing that I've certainly found is, and in gliding as well, you know, you've kind of got to be open to the idea of you're going to mess up, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to, you know, I'm sure as many of you know, I've ended up in far too many fields to count in a glider, and, you know, I can be taken as mistakes, but like I've learned something from every single one. But yeah, kind of going back to the CPL, you know, I had to say to my instructor, look, I'm going to be not good at this. Can you show me, you know, I'm at a CPL level, which you're kind of expected to be, but I kind of, you know, quite openly said, are you able to give me a slight kind of guiding hand? You know, if I'm kind of not looking so sure in something, just kind of prompt me. And I found that kind of style of teaching was really conducive in terms of helping me just get my confidence back. So now when I'm, you know, going off and flying with my instructors, etc., up at ACS, I'm kind of, the confidence that I feel is kind of built on lots of little kind of blocks of, you know, slowly getting more confident in things again when you've not done them for so long. And I think that definitely comes from a point of view of, you know, I've got lots of, you know, gliding and flying hours behind me, but when it comes to the powered, like, I've not got as much of that kind of procedural space that I've used. Like, I've mainly been doing, you know, tug flying, which is a lot of fun. Not gonna lie on that one, it's great fun to do. But when it comes to, as Stan said, the commercial stuff, it's not too transferable in terms of what you're actually doing. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Tom, can I ask? I mean, you know, you're having to finance your way through you know, through, you know, the commercial. So, I mean, how do you, I mean, one of the big things is, you know, one of the things I've alluded to is that, you know, both Jamie and I'm not quite sure about Matty, but, you know, they've paid for it. They've paid as they go along. I mean, if you go on an approved course, you're talking well over £100,000.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go down the self-improver route, so I mean, you as you say, you know, as I've mentioned, you know, you're working as a courier driver, and so on. So how do you plan financing this? You know, do you mind me asking?
Yeah. So the plan is to just work, and you know, if I can save up the chunk of money, and then I'll pay for the, you know, whatever training I'm doing, whether it's MEIR or MEP, the multi-engine piston rating or the multi-engine instrument rating. The ATPLs will be all self-funded if I can't get a scholarship. So I'm constantly going to be looking for scholarships as well, and then applying for them. So that's that's the plan anyway. It's
So
just paying as I go, really.
Yeah, what scholarships are available?
This, off the top of my head, well, yeah, probably it's best.
Yeah, so I think with scholarships wise, there's a lot available, especially for us, you know, youthful lot or as youths. There's there's a lot of scholarships around. There's the Honourable Company of Air Pilots, which do both instructor bursaries, powered instructor bursaries, and they do solo gliding. I recently sent out a document to all the cadets that had a massive list of all the ones that they're able to apply for. But in the powered world, you know, there's always people and scholarships around that you know. I've found over the years that a lot of people are very generous and willing to give to those that are going to, that they view are going to do the work. And I've been very fortunate over the years to have a lot of the incremental steps, like funded, like my night rating. I got an Air League scholarship, and the Air League are fantastic in what they do. And I think
they are. Yeah.
Obviously, Tom, you're of an age where a lot of the bursaries usually only extend to kind of
25,
25 maximum, sometimes only 21.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I think aviation could maybe do more of, is have slightly more bursaries tailored towards, you know, people older than 25, because, you know, not everyone's in the position to be able to afford, just because they're older doesn't mean they can afford to follow a chosen career path, because you know, someone might come to, you know, I'm very fortunate that, you know, my parents are funding quite a lot of the training that I'm doing, and that's a certain privilege that comes with that. And you know, whereas
I tried to ask my parents to remortgage the house, and they said no. So
yeah, that's
why I'm paying for it.
That's one of these things Sam kind of alluded to there, was, you know, there's the self-improver, which you can call modular training, which is very much the route I think Tom and I are both going down. Is modular training is doing things as and when time and, you know, money allows, whereas integrated training, I know a few people that have done that, and that's kind of going away. Zero to heroes, a lot of people call it. There's different types of integrated training. You can do all the licenses, but all just kind of one after the other. Or there's MPLs, which are kind of tied to airlines, which they kind of sponsor you through these programs. There's, as I said earlier, there's like many branches to which you can go down and, you know, kind of achieving the goal of becoming a, you know, professional pilot. You know, I having spoken to my instructors up at ACS, they're, you know, they're career instructors, some of them, and, you know, that's what they do, and they enjoy what they do. And I think that's, certainly one thing I've, like we both discussed it over the last couple of days, was like finding a job that you enjoy, rather than, you know, it's kind of finding that passion that you've got for aviation in the job that you do. And I think that's something certainly gliding's given me over the years, is kind of a real love for the sport of, you know, not just gliding but flying in itself and what it brings.
Tom, Did you ever think about going abroad to do your training? I think one of our girls, I've forgotten her name, she went to Poland for a few months and got
Yeah.
a PPL. Was that of use to you, or was it? No?
You know, it was. I didn't really think about it at the time. I've thought about it a lot more, but I already started the training and stuff and other commitments. But definitely in the future, I'm very keen to get abroad. You know, do something over in the Middle East. You know, I've been over in the Middle East before, and it's quite nice.
Yeah, I think there's
So-
lots of our junior members, I think, from speaking to them kind of over the last few years when they've kind of been joining, I think a lot of them are obviously kind of interested in going around down the same sort of career paths. And that's one thing that, you know, to make quite clear is, like, you know, aviation's one of these things where obviously, you know, COVID's happened, it's, you know, kind of had a bit of a dip, but it's one of these things where there's always opportunities in front of you to be had. You know, like, as David was saying, you know, Rachel, she did her PPL in the UK, but you can, this is the beauty of modular training, you can kind of go where you want, you're not tied to anywhere.
Or Brexit.
Yeah, so she went off to Poland, did her commercial pilot's license, multi-engine IR out there. So that's one thing that I think is quite good in terms of keeping that open mind and kind of open road in front of you of, I can go almost where you want and kind of what suits you best.
Yeah.
A comment from Ryanair that
Yeah.
he's put on the chat, you know, having built up hours on the tug does mean that you can concentrate on the procedural part of the training because you don't have to think about the manual flying. That's his opinion. I mean,
I would say that's an incredibly correct opinion. That's one thing I think certainly helped as a, you know, when I was talking about that kind of sense of relaxed flying environment that I've kind of managed to kind of create when I'm doing my commercial license. I think that's incredibly correct because, you know, I'm sitting under the hood, you know, if you've not got a Garmin 1000 in front of you, which is kind of one of these kind of, you know, really fancy navigation equipment, I've got some steam gauges and a basic kind of Garmin navigation equipment. And yeah, I think the one thing that all the flying I've done up till now is kind of taught me is that I've got the baseline kind of skill. Like, it helps to have, you know, that experience and kind of behind you of all these sorts of things that I've done over the years of mistakes and kind of successes as well in terms, but like that, you know, I'm not having to focus on flying the plane. And for some, you know, for some people maybe doing the 0 to hero, they've not had that kind of experience and build up towards that sort of training. Whereas like I found that I've had a lot of extra capacity to be able to kind of, and workload to focus on actually flying something accurately and doing everything correctly and flying, you know, descending at the right descent rates, distances. And, you know, it is quite fun when you're flying in cloud. You know, my instructor's got an IR rating, so we can do that. But like, you know, we're flying in cloud under the hood, and all of a sudden we kind of pop all the VORs, and it's all lining up onto the GPS to come in, you know, into runway 21 at Perth. And you're coming in, and then you just pop out the cloud at 1,000 feet, and you just drop it down at another 2.5 miles. You just drop down again, and then he tells you take off the hood, and you plonk it on the runway. Well, sometimes maybe not so gracefully, but yeah, it's that kind of experience of lots of flying has then helped to create. It's allowed me to enjoy what I'm doing as well. You know, sometimes when you're so focused on what you're on flying something, you kind of don't get to sit there and enjoy the moment. Like, I've certainly found that in a lot of the cross country flying I've done. It's like in November last year, I had a really nice flight in one of the two-seaters, and it was just kind of, you got to sit there and just enjoy what you were doing and kind of take in. You don't always get those opportunities when you're maybe racing for a target or something. You just kind of get to sit there and appreciate what you're doing. Sometimes it does. Yeah.
Jono, can I just add my tuppence worth about the transferable skills part of it. You're talking about, the tug initially. You didn't think there was transferable skills towards airline flying.
Yeah.
And I think Reiner made a comment. I think it's really important. Having good handling skills makes a huge difference when you come to doing things like instrument ratings and accurate flying. When you're doing, say, a single engine ILS, because it gives you a lot of spare capacity. So all the time you get in the tug and flying gliders is really important, and it's an opportunity to try and hone your flying skills as much as possible, and it'll make your commercial flying, I'm sure Sant would agree, make it a lot easier. Messing up in the simulator because they just couldn't fly the aircraft, and all their concentration is on trying to fly, so they can't cope dealing with the other aspects when things start to go wrong. So handling skills are really important. It'll make your life as an airline pilot a lot easier, and you won't sweat so much every time you're going into the simulator every 6 months wondering if you still have a job when you come out.
Yeah, I mean, flying the tug's been incredibly beneficial. I was very lucky at the point that I went to do it. There wasn't too many people and doing it, and I got rather a lot of time to fly. And I think, as you said, it's like that hand flying ability, especially in an aircraft kind of as nippy as the Eurofox can be at points in blustery conditions. I think to any kind of junior or older member that's kind of in the kind of pipeline or route of wanting to be a commercial pilot, I think I can't recommend wanting to fly the tug or flying the tug enough, because it's just, there's a lot. You wouldn't think there's a lot to it, but there is. Like when you're managing the plane in front of you, but you're also kind of in charge of the combination. You're kind of, as Colin once told me, you've kind of always got to think the person behind you is trying to kill you. So there's that nice edge to it.
When I think back to when I did my instrument rating, I think there were about 6 of us going through it down at Leiston. And another chap was a glider pilot from Dunstable, and we found it so much easier than all the other people who'd been instructing PPL level, instructing for a long time. So we both, as glider pilots, developed a lot of good handling skills, and the guys that have just been flying Cessnas around struggled a lot when it came to the instrument flying.
Yeah, I mean, like during the CPL, like some days it's a bit challenging conditions. We've certainly been pushing the limits of what you're actually allowed to fly in, and it's that nice sense of kind of, I know I can handle the plane right now, even if I'm under that little bit of pressure. All I need to think about is the decision making rather than the actual flying. I think my instructors maybe been like, kind of not taken aback, but like kind of like, you sure you're okay with this? And I'm like, I feel like I can do this. It's not a kind of a case of you don't feel overloaded in terms of that pressure to push yourself beyond what you think you can do. You can just do it, and that, I think that comes with time and actually lots of mistakes previously, because I've kind of done things in the past where I'm like, I won't be doing that again, or I know I can't do that sort of thing. And you learn these sorts of attitudes to be able to say okay. And I think that was going back to kind of what happened at the juniors, is like that kind of being able to take a step out of the situation and assess it almost weirdly in like a third person. I found that's happened a few times, as much as that sounds a bit odd. But yeah. All right. Thanks, Martin. But yeah, the coaching, and I think as we've kind of talked about as well, was coaching's helped us incredibly, and it's I think creating that, like when you go on to do the multi-crew cooperation course, like that transferableness of learning how to be coached and kind of almost like be instructed to do things and kind of told this is how it happens, and then take that information in. It's like it's helped a lot in terms of being able to just sit with an instructor and kind of take on that information and apply it right there and then, and hopefully not make too many mistakes as you're doing it. Yeah. Nice. Oh. So has anyone got any more questions?
Yeah, I mean, are you worried about I mean, the aviation market is not very good at the moment. You know, but I mean, you know, and an airline career may not be open for a few years because of you know, the current situation. I mean, how do you feel about that?
You know, I think if you don't, you know, the way I see it is I'm not rushing to anything. I don't want to rush into anything because, you know, I'm taking my time. I'm waiting till the market, you know, hits the high again. And
yeah, I think along that note, like I think I was obviously COVID's not been great, but I think I've been almost like unfortunate, like fortunate but unfortunate at the same time. You know, I obviously failed my ATPLs, but that's kind of had its own lessons. But then the timing of everything's allowed me that I'm doing my CPL now. When I ended up leaving Dundee, kind of the training school at Dundee in 2019, and I kind of took a step back and said, you know, I kind of want to go down a much more modular training route, and that's allowing kind of, you know, to do flying, do the ratings as and when kind of suits financial and kind of time wise. And I think, you know, I've kind of long held the dream of wanting to go to New Zealand to go do gliding, instructing, and towing out there, and that's only been possible through overall the things that I've done over the years. But like that's something that, as a result of kind of the aviation market not being so great, might allow me to go achieve, you know, a long held dream of mine, and kind of now potentially a goal which I'm working towards for the end of the year. But, you know, I think as we've said, like I think maybe obviously the airline aviation market's not so great, but you know, there's other aspects and like routes of flying can go. One of the instructors from ACS ended up flying for, is it the DEA? So he's doing like Coast Guard flying in King Airs, which sounds rather fun. You know, there's lots of, it's not just, I've kind of very much kind of gained that attitude towards it of, it's not just airlines, there's so many different things in aviation that you can kind of attribute yourself to and your skills to, rather than just, you know, obviously the airline market's not good, but there's not just that around. And I think that's one thing to really keep in mind, is kind of that sense of there's so much more than just that.
It's very encouraging to hear that, because one of the sort of things that gets me is you know, if I can, as an old git, I mean, when I started flying, and my career has been interesting, and I know when I started, all I want, if I could end up, when I started out, I thought, well, if I can end up flying an Aztec, or getting, oh, sorry to sound a bit, what's the word I'm thinking of? Oh, it doesn't matter. But what I thought, I want to get into the higher income tax bracket, which in those days was 4,000 a year. That was a higher income tax bracket. That's all I ever wanted to achieve from a financial point of view. And but I'd have been happy if I'd just ended up flying an Aztec, which is, I suppose, sort of the equivalent of a Seneca these days. And all I was interested in was, I just wanted to fly. And one of the sort of things, I'm not being funny about it, but I think you know, you look at, like we've got G Dow coming up and all the rest of it. Well, you look at what G's doing, and I think that's a fantastic job that he's got, you know, and he's really enjoying what he's doing. And you know, the point is that, you know, if you love flying, my attitude is it doesn't matter what you're flying, as long as you're flying. And I think a lot of people get mixed up with, for example, getting in the higher income tax bracket and having an airline career and all this sort of stuff, and they're not actually sort of turning around and saying, well, it's because I really, really enjoy it and I love it. And you know, and I think that's really the most important thing, because, you know, says he is, again, as an old git, you've only got one life and you might as well do what you bloody hell you want to do, because you won't get the opportunity again. And you know, both of you sound as if you're sort of going down that path, if I might say so.
Yeah, I would say so. I think I've kind of very much kind of having started out through kind of being introduced to aviation through gliding, and I can thank my dad for that one. You know, it's certainly growing up and learning how to fly in that kind of environment's helped kind of adopt the right kind of attitude of flying's meant to be fun and something to be enjoyed and kind of shared with, you know, friends and family. And I think that's kind of something that I've want to try and continue with other, like through doing coaching and instructing, etc., is really share my own kind of fun, like joy for it. Because, you know, you have those sorts of flights where you just kind of you kind of fall in love with what you're doing even more, because you just have those moments that are kind of, I don't know, indescribable, not in a sort of way, without sounding too cringy.
Are there any young people? Because I look at the list of people here, and most of them are old gits. So, are there any young people that are listening into this that wish to make a comment or, you know, about what's been said? Who's Sarah Bellamy? I don't think we've met. Are there any young people? That
Yeah, I'm a young person, hopefully wanting to become a pilot one day, just like them. But I do have a question actually. What do you think about how more and more, like you know, all these Airbuses with the autopilots? You know, you're flying the aircraft less than when it's on autopilot. So how do you feel about that?
Well, I think that's maybe like one of well, certainly my career aims is to end up where somewhere maybe you're flying like Saabs or ATRs or smaller planes where that sort of autopilot doesn't exist. I mean, granted, you know, there'll be a stage in your career where you'll maybe want to be going towards that sort of stuff because, you know, you'll be earning more money probably in terms of, you know, want to pay for gliding and families and whatnot. But
Yeah,
I think, like we were speaking to Jamie earlier today, and he was saying, you know, the stuff that these planes can do now is insane, quite frankly. But I think, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, but like, I think I'd quite like to end up in a job where there's a lot of hand flying involved. And I think trying to find the right place that suits that's going to be a challenge, but you can always find them.
yeah.
I think that's where one thing I think, you know, quite a few of the airline pilots that are at the club will say is, you know, they've kept gliding as part of their flying careers kind of the whole way through, and that's certainly, you know, Tom and I were chatting earlier about Rory Ellis, who was someone he flew with, and I had quite a few lengthy discussions with him down at the juniors, and speaking to him, you know, you're kind of sitting there and he's kind of, you kind of aspire to be like that, of having, you know, kind of a really solid career in aviation, but also really kind of allowing gliding to still remain a very strong part of what you're doing and help kind of supplement kind of, you know, what flying you do as an enjoyment and a hobby.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Brian, you used to fly the Airbus, and I mean, I quite agree. It is a management, you know, essentially managing a system. But I mean, how often did you fly it manually?
I hand flew it virtually all the time. Well, below 10,000 feet. You have to practice to maintain your flying skills. I mean, the only time I did an automatic approach of it was a Cat 3. You know, if you had to use the autopilot to land. Otherwise, I always hand flew the approaches. And
I was under the impression that you could
raw data, no auto thrust either. Jamie says EasyJet have actually stopped doing that now, the same as BA. You're not allowed to take the auto thrust out, which I think is awful. You know, in a beautiful day coming into Edinburgh, it's really nice to hand fly, you know, without all the aids. And if you don't practice, you lose your flying skills very, very quickly.
Well, I
You
can
probably
imagine
know that yourself,
yeah.
Sam. You know, people that use the automatics all the time, they had very poor handling skills because they just didn't practice. But you know, even on something like the Airbus, you can fly it as much as you want, really. An EasyJet, have been quite reasonable, and they're not as restrictive as BA, as long as you're not hand flying it in the middle of the London TMA, with a ceiling or something. So there's plenty of opportunity to fly it. But the most fun I ever had was in turboprops, back in the Loganair days. That's where the enjoyment is, but there's not so much money there, and probably not as good job security either. And that's why most people want to end up in a Boeing or an Airbus.
Yeah, job security.
I mean, Loganair is certainly kind of one of my kind of career ambitions, or kind of an airline like that, wherever that be in the world, where there's obviously a gliding club nearby. But like do that sort of kind of island hopping, quick, lots of hand flying. That in my mind really appeals to me. Of it's kind of fast, fun, and lots to do. Keeps it stimulating, etc. But there's so many different routes and jobs out there. I think it's kind of picking the right one that suits the person.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a matter of what you want to do, and also how you want to run your life, basically. I mean, to take Robert Tate, for example. I mean, Robert has changed careers in his mid-40s. Robert's CFI up at Easterton, and very good glider pilot. And anyway, he was working in the oil industry and was made redundant, and went and got his commercial pilot's license, and he's flying a King Air for Gamma, which is the air ambulance, or they've got a contract to do the air ambulance work in Scotland, and so he's based in Inverness, or Aberdeen actually. He's based at Aberdeen, but he lives near Inverness, and he flies this King Air. Has just become a captain, and does very interesting flying. And the other thing that I really like about it is it actually serves a purpose in that he's saving lives, which is quite nice. So I mean, I will say that I personally, I think that the flying opportunities in Scotland for real flying are actually really quite good with Loganair, and and it is actually quite an interesting country to fly over, because the weather's really quite interesting. The point being is that there are many paths which you can go down, flying in an aviation career. It's up to you to decide.
Yeah, I think that's certainly one thing that's a learning curve over the years, is trying to take yourself out of that closed mindset of it's only airlines, when there's not that. It's very much the opposite.
Got to be open to opportunities.
Yeah.
I got a comment here. Yeah, that's right. We've answered that one. Okay. Any other questions at all?
That's
Yeah.
That's a nice comment from Sarah. Thank you very much. Oh, yeah. So, anything to add, Tom?
No. Anything to add, John?
No. Yeah.
Tom, is that a very small aeroplane, or are you extremely tall?
I'm extremely tall. I managed to fit in them, believe it or not.
Yeah.
I still can't believe I managed to fit into a 152. It is cramped. It's very cramped. I fly in the Warriors now. They're much more spacious.
Mm-hmm. Large enough to do most of my training in them. So
yes.
Nice and roomy. So,
yeah.
I mean, I see there's still Cessna 150s flying about that I used to fly in. I was an instructor at Tayside in 1973, and they still got bloody aeroplanes floating about that.
The reg?
It's most probably changed ownership so many times. But the windows are so crazed, you can hardly see out them. I saw one at Perth. I thought, bloody hell, airplane's got to be about 60 years old. Anyway, right, okay. Well, thanks, John and Tom. I mean, I think that's excellent, and thanks very much for that.
Thank you.